ठीक है, कर दो स्टार्ट। अच्छा जी, अस्सलाम वालेकुम. Now we're going to do a quick bit of revision for the embryo and the general anatomy, just for the benefit of the newcomers who've just joined in, so that they are able to recollect, or they start on with us, or they join us from what all we have done. So it's going to be a quick one. So, and for the benefit of those who are already there, and for those for the newcomers. Now we're going to start with the general anatomy. Now, what exactly do you mean by the general anatomy? Is these are the terminologies that we use, anatomical medical terminologies. That is all what is just purely anatomical terminologies, and those which are related with the clinical aspect. So that is what exactly we are going to talk about in the general anatomy. बच्चे ये आगे नहीं जा रही. ये आगे नहीं हो रहा, ये स्लाइड आगे नहीं आ रही. ये क्या हुआ? चेक कर लेते हैं. बच्चे अभी स्लाइड आगे नहीं जा रही. माउस से यहाँ पे क्लिक करेंगे, इससे यहाँ पे क्लिक करेंगे, क्लिक कर देंगे, अब आगे नीचे करेंगे ना, ऊपर नीचे वाले. ठीक है, थैंक यू. Actually, sorry, there was some technical error. Now, so what is anatomy? Anatomy is the science of structure. How do you define anatomy? It is the science of structure and function. It includes the cells, tissues, organs, and the system that are there. There are two basic branches of the anatomy. One is the basics, that is the study of the minimal amount of anatomy. That is all what you know, the structure of the functioning of the body. And then how do you relate the normal structure with the clinical aspect, that is when it is related with the clinical side. Study of the macroscopic study and function of the body relates with the medicine. How can you relate your medical, the general anatomy with that of the clinical anatomy? What are the basis of, or the different branches that we study anatomy? It's not that just you hold a bone and you study with the anatomy. It's developmental, starting from how the things are formed. Then if you are coming into the clinic, how the patient is going to be said, that if he holds his left or right side, that he's feeling complaint in that portion. How does the doctors know what organ lies at what place? That is related with the surface anatomy. So he marks the organ on the surface, that is called the surface anatomy. Then there is the radiological study of the bones, certain soft organs as well. Then you study, make sections, you put thin sections of the tissue, and then you study it under the microscope, that is there. Then you study the gross anatomy. Gross anatomy is also called the regional anatomy, topographic anatomy. That is the way you have the study of the head and neck, the study of the limbs, that is there, then the abdomen, thorax. So all the different gross regions which are there, that is called the gross anatomy or the regional anatomy. This can be studied as a region that is purely anatomical, that is supposing it's the upper limb, the bones of the upper limb, muscles, tissues, etc. The stomach is then, it is related with all the other functions that is there, that is a system. What part of the system? It's going to be the musculoskeletal system. So it's going to be a part of that system, and it's not only just the upper limb which is going to be a part, it's going to be the other systems as well, and then what all clinical aspects are related with it. Gross anatomy, we divide it into different components. One is, if you say regional study, is major parts and segments, head, neck, trunk, limbs. These are according to the regions that we study. Systemic is when more than one region collectively works together and it forms a system. That is what we is the systemic study. And then what is related to the clinical aspect for the diagnosis and the treatment. You apply the knowledge of the anatomy onto the clinical aspects. Then how do you study a person? The study of the person is the position, all the different terminologies which have been divided. They are according to this position, that is with some reference. That is what we call as the anatomical position. So with reference to this portion, you are going to label something which is medial, lateral, superior or inferior. So how do you define the anatomical position? The anatomical position is defined as a person is standing erect, if you see in this picture, with the upper limbs on the sides, and the palms, that is the front palm of your hands, they are directed forwards, as you can see in this picture, because normally when you stand you put your hands directed backwards, but that is not the anatomical plane. It is the palms are directed forwards, the eyes are looking towards the horizon, the lower limb and the feet are close together and they are pointing in front. So that is the exact position of the anatomical position of a human body. When you start to describe certain terminologies, you put the body in this position and then with reference you divide it into different terms. What is the lifespan? Before birth, it is about 40 weeks, 280 days, 9 calendar months, anything can be used. Then there are two periods, that is, one is up to 3 months, that is the embryonic period when all the development of the baby is going on in the intrauterine line. And fetal period is after the third month, that is the development 9th week onwards to the birth, that is the increase in size grows. Then is after birth, that is called the postnatal period. Then you have a newborn or a neonate, that is just up till 1 year you will label the baby as a newborn or a neonate. And up till 1 year you call the baby as an infant, and then after 1 year it is labeled as the childhood. Then puberty is different in males and females. In the girls it is about 2 years earlier, that is you can see 13 to 12 to 15 years in girls, and boys it's later 13 to 16 years, where your secondary sex characteristics they start to appear. Menarche, when the period starts or the menstrual cycle starts, that is the starting of your menarche or the end of the female puberty, because then all the features they have already developed. Sperm formation in the males is the end of the puberty. So puberty, that is when all the maturation starts. In the girls it is 2 years earlier as compared to the boys, and when menarche, that is when the menstrual cycle starts, that is the end of the female puberty time, that is what we say. And when the sperms start to form, we call that the end of the puberty of the male. Adult life is 11 to 19 years, mental, physical, emotional. Maturity, adulthood is around till 21 years, that is when only ossification, bone development, all that occurs. Old age is when 61 onwards, that is the on that. Then how do you study the planes of the body, what body lies in what part? They have 4 imaginary planes. There's nothing in nature divided into these planes there, but they are imaginary planes that we talk about the movements with relation to these planes. 4 imaginary planes. It is a median plane which is in the center, that is it divides things into left and right halves, which is parallel to the sagittal plane, or you call it the sagittal plane. Then there's the frontal or the coronal plane, that is at right angles. That means lying, which divides the body into anterior and the posterior half. And transverse is when it is divide the body, it is a horizontal plane and it divides the body into a superior and the inferior part of the body. So if you see in these pictures, you can see this, the different planes. Median plane is right hand when it divides the body into right and left halves. Sagittal plane is parallel to the median plane, and if it is something which is parallel to the sagittal plane, is because you have the sagittal suture, that is with the reference to that we give it the name as the sagittal plane, and something which is parallel to the sagittal is given the name as parasagittal. Then you have a coronal plane which is there, a coronal suture which is divides the body into interior and posterior, and transverse one is the horizontal plane. So again, this picture shows you the different planes, that is the anterior posterior, that is the coronal, sagittal and the horizontal. This is a collective picture of the planes which are there. and then the anatomical position of the body. Then there are different terms and relationships. You have anterior and posterior. You can use, in case of the hand and the feet, you use the term palmar and dorsal. Palmar is in the case of the hand, that is the front of the arm, and dorsal is the back of the hand. In case of the foot, you use the term as plantar, that is the under surface of the feet, and dorsal is the upper surface of the feet. Proximal and distal is from the roots of the limb. If something is near to it, we are going to give it the name as proximal, and something away from it, that is the distal. That is something within relation to the roots of the limbs that is usually used. Superficial and deep on the relation to the surface of the body. Then there is external and internal term, that is relative distance from the center of the organ of the cavity. If it is more related to the inner side, that is going to be called as the internal, and something which is more on the outer side, it's going to be called the external. Then superior and inferior, near to your skull is going to be the cranium. Superior, and something which is more near to the feet is going to be called as the inferior. Then you have the cranial and caudal. These terms are usually used as cranial is near to the skull and caudal is towards the feet. This is usually used when you are doing the embryology or you are talking about the development. Then there is medial and lateral. Medial is something which is near going to be the central plane, that is the medial plane, and lateral is something which is away from it. Combined terms, that is something which is not in relation purely to medial or lateral, then we call it a combined terms. Supromedial, inframedial, supralateral, all these are collective terms. That is something which is describing something which is in relation to midway. Supine is when you lie straight, your back is in relation with the bed and your face is facing upwards. That position is called the supine position. And prone position is upside down. That is when your face is facing towards the bed and your back is facing upwards. This is called the prone position. Then whether it is on one side, whether it is on both the sides, that is what we mean as the terms of laterality. Bilateral is something which structures on both the sides. Unilateral is something which is just present on one side. Ipsilateral and contralateral is something is involved. That is, if supposing a nerve on the left side is damaged, all the changes which are occurring because of the damage of that nerve, they are on the same left side. That is going to be called an ipsilateral. That means on the same side. And if it is contralateral, that is on the right side the damage occurs, and the nerve is involved on the left side and the changes are present on the right side, it's going to be called contralateral, occurring on the opposite side of it. This is basically used term which is used in the neurology. Then there are certain movements that we talk about. Flexion is the angle when it decreases between the two parts. Extension is increase in the angle. That means flexion is when the two bones they come together. Extension is when they move away from each other. In the foot, we use the term, instead of pure flexion and extension, it is dorsiflexion. That is when it goes towards the dorsum of the foot or the ground. Or plantar flexion is when it goes towards the floor or the ground, and that is in relation with the plantar surface. Circumduction, as you see in this picture, is a combination of all these movements. That is a rotation. Then is rotation. This is going to, if you see the certain axes we are going to talk about, they are in relation. Flexion and extension, it is in relation with the axis or the plane which is passing transversely. Whereas rotation occurs along something which is vertical, and in reference to that it is going to rotate. If it rotates inwards, it's going to be called your medial rotation, and if it rotates outwards, it's going to be called the external rotation or the lateral rotation. Pronation and supination. This is commonly used with the hand. Pronation is something that your palmar surface faces downwards. That is, it rotates, your wrist rotates, and your palm of the surface is facing downwards. That is pronation. And supination is when your hand is again facing upwards. That is as if you are begging something. That is the supination. That is again if the two bones become parallel to each other and they are lying parallel, and the hand or the palmar surface is facing upwards, as you can see in this picture. That is pronation and supination. Abduction and adduction. Abduction is something which is, again, the relation comes with the median plane. That is something which is moving away from the median plane is going to be called abducted, and something which is going to move towards the median plane, that is going to be adducted. So add is very simple to remember. It is an adduction. Eversion and inversion. Eversion is a term that we use, that something which is going to face outwards. That is eversion. Basically, this term is used when you are talking about the foot movement. So if your medial border of the foot is in relation with the ground and the lateral one is raised up, and your sole of the foot is facing laterally or outwards, that is going to be called the eversion. And if it is the other way around, your lateral border of the foot is facing touching the ground and your sole is facing me inside, this is called the inversion. And these are both movements, if you see in this picture, these are basically related with your movements of the foot. Protrusion, retraction, elevation, depression, these are for the acromioclavicular joints and for your mandible that is used. Protrusion is something which is projecting forwards. So when you protrude your shoulders forwards, that is a protrusion. And supposing if you protrude your jaw forwards, that is from the temporomandibular joint, that is what we call as the protrusion. Retraction is when it is pulled back to its normal position, and as the way you brace your shoulders, that is your retracted position. Elevation is when you shrug up your shoulders, or when your mouth is open and you close your mouth, that is you again elevate. So when your mouth is open, it is a depressive phase. That means your mandible is being depressed. That is depression. And when you close your mouth, again you're taking back the mandible to its normal position. That is called the elevation. So that these two are terms basically used in the shoulder girdle and in the mandible. These are all collective. Now, in case of the foot and the hand, the center is something very important, is that the center or the median plane in reference to which we talk about the movements is not your median plane, that is your sagittal suture, but it is your, if you see in this picture, that is the midline. The midline or the middle finger is taken as the center of the axis, or that is your median plane. So your movements are going to be talked about in relation with this middle of the that is, if something is directed inwards towards this middle finger, that is going to be called the adduction. If something is away from it, it is going to be called the abduction. So same is the case in the case of the foot. So when you talk about adduction and abduction in case of the hand and the feet, your axis, something, your reference point that is going to be used is going to be your middle finger and not your finger or the axis or the midline, that is your sagittal suture or the median plane. Then what is a joint? There two bones meet, that is known as a joint. Some have no movement, some have only slight movement, and some are freely mobile joints. So you have joints where the two bones or more bones come together, and when the movements they're classified according to the number or the types of movements. We'll talk about the joints later on. Then is the skin, the outermost covering of the body, that is the skin, the integument skin or the cutis. It has different parts. If you see in this picture, that is epidermis, dermis and hypodermis or your superficial fascia. If you can see in this dark brown portion that is above the uppermost layer, that is the epidermis. That is the cutaneous, the cells which are going to line it. Dermis is this broad, wider portion which is going to be your dermis, which contains all the connective tissue, the hair follicles, glands, etc. All that is going to be your dermis. And below the dermis, that part where you are labeled as superficial fascia, that is also called the hypodermis, that is underneath the skin, that is hypodermis. So you have three parts: epidermis, dermis and hypodermis. Anatomically and physiologically specialized skin is structurally and functionally, that is what we say as anatomically and physiologically, the specialized boundary lamina essential to life. It forms about 8% of the total body mass, and thickness varies. At the palm of your hand, sole of the foot, it is about 4 millimeters, where it is very thin at your eyelids, and certain other portions of thickness varies, and it covers whole of the external surface of the body. These are the parts of the skin. If you see, that is, at certain places we have thick skin and at certain places we have thin skin. The thick skin and thin skin is divided because of the number of the epidermis layer. That is, the number of the thicker the epidermis layer, that is going to be called as your thick skin, and in that you don't have hair follicles and the sebaceous glands related appendages with it, whereas the thin skin is that which has lesser number of epidermal layers, and you have the hair follicles, or it is also called as your hairy skin, and it also has the glands related to it. Sweat glands are present in both the types of skin. What exactly are the functions? It's not just a barring lamina, but it is a self-renewing and repairing interface, because your skin is all the time changing its structure. The dead skins are being removed, the dead cells are being removed, and you are renewing it and repairing the surface. It protects you against the microbial invasions. It protects against dehydration, that is all the time exposed to the sun, otherwise your body would be dehydrated. It protects because of the thickness of the layer, the pigments or the coloration of the skin, excessive external mechanical, chemical, osmotic, these agents. It protects from that, regulates the body temperature. It is a sensory receptor. How do you know that something has touched your body? That is because the skin is a sensory receptor. It is going to act as excretion and absorption. Something you rub on the skin, that is going to be absorbed, and excretion is your sweat. That is all the time being excreted, and your chemical composition of the body is being maintained. Then is biochemical functions. Vitamin D is the ultraviolet rays, and that is very important for your body. Condition of the health and the age. In old age, very with unhealthy people, your age is going to be shown by the skin. That is a sagged skin, there are certain wrinkles on it, and the freshness is not there. And if you are fresh, your body is healthy, and you are a healthy person, it's going to show on the skin, glowing skin. Then they are good frictional properties. Your hand and the feet, they are not smooth surfaces on the palmar and the plantar aspect, but they have certain grooves on it. This helps to prevent the things to be slipping. Then a very important thing is your personal identity. That is your dermatoglyphics. The study is dermatoglyphics. That is your thumb impression study. This thumb impression study is very important because what all you have on your thumb, the grooves or the spurs or the structure that is formed, that is from the day one you are being born, it is there and it is going to be there till you die off. So it cannot be changed, and this is what is your personal identity. That is, each and every brother and sister is going to have a different identity and different shape of structure. So that study is called dermato. Dermato is skin and glyphics. Social communications, your face, your smiling, your frowning, all that tells the other person whether he is or she is welcome or not. That is what you call as social communication, how you receive the other person. Then you have emotional states. That is, if your by vascular and muscular responses, if you're frowning, there is contraction of your forehead. That is going to give your emotional state that you are annoyed. Vascular, if you are healthy and you're smiling and you're glowing, your skin is going to be reddish. Hormonal changes are shown by the glands and the hair. Then the pathology is certain pigmentation. You know that when there is jaundice of the person, the skin is yellowish. That is detects the pathology. Pigmentation of the skin is provided by the pigment cells which are there. Then the coloration of the blood vessels, because there you have thin skin, there the blood is going to, healthy blood is going to be reflected forward, and that gives you a pigment to the color. Races protection from the ultraviolet rays, and this melanin pigment is more protective in function because from the ultraviolet rays. So that is when they are exposed to skin. As in the foreigners, you have less of melanin pigment. They are fair people that because of the exposure when in the sun tanning, that is more chances of pigment cancers, brain. Then thickness of the skin, color and cornified skin gives protection. Then what are the different types of cells of the skin? There are 4 basic types of cells of the skin. Main cell is the keratinocytes, as you have seen, you study in detail in the histology. That is keratinocytes. These are the main cells which are there. Then you have which produce all the functions, the different layers. Then you have these Langerhans cells. These Langerhans cells, they are said to be your defense mechanism of the skin. They are these, if you see in this picture. Then you have these melanocytes. These melanocytes are the cells which produce the melanin pigment, which gives the coloration of the skin. And then you have these Merkel cells. These Merkel cells are the cells which are the touch receptors. That is, when something touches your skin, how do you know? That is taken because these are related by the nerve. And this, with the cell, it's going to take up the message via the nerve to the nervous system and tell you that something has touched. What type of touch is there? It is going to be received. So you can say Merkel cells are acting as your sensory receptors. What are the appendages of the skin? That is something which are added with the dermis, epidermis and the hypodermis. These are the glands which are called your sebaceous glands. These sebaceous glands, they lie along, they open in the root of the hair follicles. These provide the oily secretion that lubricates the hair follicles, and when these are infected, that is what you get as pimples. This is the structure is the hair follicle. Hair is going to protect when it is on the skin. Then you have the sweat glands. If you see this, they are lying in the hypodermis, in the epidermis, and their ducts open up onto the surface of the body. These produce or they maintain the chemical composition of the body. Then you have these different parts of the nail, which are also the appendages of the skin. Then what is the blood supply? The blood supply, because metabolic demand is not much functioning is going on, but still skin has a lot of supply, 10 times more than their nutritional demand. It is given by three types of layers, and it is said that because you are thermoregulatory function, so plenty of blood supply is given to this tissue. They are coming from three ways. That is, the plenty of blood supply is coming from three areas. One is directly something which is being supplied to the skin is called your cutaneous portion. So that is something arteries which are directly cutaneous artery. If you see the A part. So some vessels which are giving a direct branch to the skin, that is the cutaneous system. Then you have a musculocutaneous system, that is the muscles. If you see in the lower picture, some of the muscles, they're getting their blood supply and they're giving branches which are going to go onto the skin. So they are coming from the musculocutaneous system. And fasciocutaneous, that is the third one, that is the fascia around it, that also gives branches which are going to, if you see in this picture in the lower down, that is the fasciocutaneous. So these three are going to come independently, give blood supply at the three levels to the skin, and in the cutaneous, in the top and in the lower layers. If you see this, these are the different levels of the plexuses, that is different vessels, they are going to interrelate with each other. Some plexus is going to form below the papilla, that is from the dermal papilla on the uppermost layer. Then you are going to have it in the dermis also has different layers. One is the reticular layer, it is present, then anastomosis is going to be there, and then deep dermal layer. So all this is going to be anastomosis, that is the linking up of three types of vessels in the skin. Then it also has lymphatic, skin also has lymphatic, so it is a blind ending lymphatic capillary in the reticular system, which is going to function. Then you have this innervation of the skin. Rich nerve supply has two functional roles. One is a sensory receptor and the other is your thermoregulatory effect coming from the autonomic. So basic two functions, major sensory and the thermoregulatory, they are going to come in relation with the external environment, how you are going to face these two functions. There are mechanical stimuli, thermal stimuli, noxious stimuli that is going to be damaging, then detecting the shape. So all this is going to have two functions, and so plenty of nerve supply that is going to tell you the sensory organs because you are there, and the thermoregulatory, whether heat or cold is there, and the response to that, the body is going to contract, or the vessels are going to contract and maintain the body temperature. Then a very important thing is braille, that is the blind people, they study, though in spite of not having a eyesight, they are going to able to study, and that is by the sensory receptors which are present on the skin. They maintain this, the special birds that are books that are made, they work their hands on the books, and then they can feel the different shapes, and according to that, the texture they are reading. That is what we are called as touch study is braille. So detecting the shape and texture in exploratory test touch. That is, when they touch it, they shape and the texture, whether it is rough, smooth, or what, they make out what all they are touching without the help of their vision. That study is known as braille. So that is again a very important function of the skin for the blind people. Then is, if you see it in the clinical aspects, these skin tension lines. These skin tension lines, one important line is, if you see, these are not marked by nature, but there are certain creases which are being formed, and you can see that there are different structures, or these creases are present in different directions in all parts of the body. So these are called the Langer lines. Skin tension lines, known as Langer lines or lines of cleavage, are linear clefts in the skin, and they indicate the direction of the, and these are based on according to the direction of the collagen fibers, that is the connective tissue which is present according to that these lines or the patterns have been made. If these are cut, they would regenerate, but the wounds tend to reproximate. That is, if they are cut parallel to these, the wounds will not gape too much, but if they're cut at right angles to these tendon direction, then more of scars are going to be formed. So these are very important. These are Langer lines. Clinically, that is why they are important. Then you have skin lines or creases, externally visible markings, patterns of epidermal creases that you see. There are certain tension lines, flexion lines, friction ridges, which I see on the hand where you have on the joints. Stria gravidarum is those pigmented areas which you see when the tissue damages and then it is changes color. That is when the pregnancy, when there is distension or widening or stretching up of the abdomen, that is stria gravidarum or the lines. Then pigment markings where there is excessive exposure of the skin, that is pigment markings or transitions. Wrinkle lines with the old age because the fat below is finished off, and that is why it produces these wrinkle lines. So these are all externally visible. Some are deeper lines, that means they are produced, that was because to the superficial structure this is produced after manipulation. That was these external visible lines or creases, these are the natural lines. But deeper lines is after manipulation, scarring. That is the way certain surgeries are done because of the remnants or not the repair of the tissue, that produces certain deeper lines after manipulation. Basically, that includes the scarring. If you see this, these are the flexure joints or skin joints, that is at the level of the joint. They basically tell you to increase the area of the skin so that the movement of the skin is facilitated. And then there are certain lines on the palm, and that is what the palmistry people make use of it. And these are that these is a heart line, this is so all the type of structures, that is these lines, that is the skin lines or the flexure lines at the bends, they are used by the palmistry people, and they tell you what all is going to happen. Certain lines are very typical in the certain diseases, so they are also called genetically. If you see those lines, especially it is known as a Simon crease, and that is what is said that it is typical for the Down syndrome children. If you see that sort of a crease on the hands of a baby, then you detect the chromosome, and then you will find that that person has a Down syndrome. So that is, it is certain clefts or flexures, or they are typical for certain diseases, so they have a diagnostic importance. Then if you see, these are the friction ridges that I was talking about, the dermatoglyphics. They are limited to palm, soles, and flexure surfaces of the digits. Increase the gripping, because if it is smooth, it is going to slip, and if it is slightly rough, then that helps in the gripping. They are formed in the early fetal life, stable and vary with the individuals, important in identification and genetic disorders. And this is what we label as dermatoglyphics, and this is very important for forensic importance, that if the identity of a person is not being known, the way you have just seen when there was this plane crash of PIA, they are identified by these ridges, by the teeth, that is all what the remnants, and then you have these DNA materials that they identify. If this is damaged, then you have to use the DNA material. So this is why you are taken as identity or thumb impressions, because you can forge your face, but these lines cannot be forged or made artificially. This is what we call as dermatoglyphics. Wrinkle lines, that is with age, they increase the surface, stretchings, recoil, contraction, lines of expression. At times, certain become permanent. Occupational lines, repeated muscular contractions, they produce lines of that specific areas. Contour lines, that is at the cheek, nose, these certain lines or the creases that develop, they are called the condylant line. Lines of dependency, that is the skin will sag, exposing at the level of the chin because of the loosening of the tissue underneath the fat. That is why they are called the lines of dependency, and that is called the gobbler's fold, because in old age the people have a protruded or a suspended chin. That is the way the turkey has a fold hanging down. That is why it is given the name as the turkey's gobbler fold in aged people. Then the intrinsic scarring, that is can be there because of the tissue. These were all structures or the creases which are produced on the surface. But then there can be certain things which can be produced intrinsically, that is greater mechanical demand than skin creases and elasticity, that is the structure above has a lesser supply as compared to the this. So you can say greater mechanical demand, that is reticular layer may rupture the fibers, deeper down may rupture granulation tissue. First it is whitish, then it is going reddish, then it is going to become whitish when the blood supply is going to be affected. That is what we say when there is increase in the size of the abdomen of the pregnant female, the skin is stretched. When the limit of the stretch to the fibers is gone, they are going to break off and then produce white lines. So intrinsic changes, initially it is going to be stria rubra, they produce these lines, rubra because they are red, then when they become whitish, they are called the stria alba, that is whitish. So these pregnancy stria are called gravidarum because it is related with the gravid means pregnancy. So in certain very fat people, in tumors, or when there is stretch of the abdomen, these stria can be produced. This is stria gravidarum. These are the lines. First, they're going to be reddish, and when the fiber tissue breaks off, blood supply is lost, it's going to become stria alba, that is whitish in color. Then there is pigmentation. Pigmentation produces certain lines and certain separating out the flexure and the extensor compartment seen in dark skin races, that is all on the skin. Then you have certain lines which are detectable after incisions or manipulations. In wounds, areas heal better, skin tension lines, all these certain lines have been seen, that is relaxed skin tension lines, that is when the skin is in a relaxed condition. Then Langerhans or cleavage lines when they are present when the skin is cut, or Hazel lines. All these are different lines which are observed on the body, and according to this, when you are cut or they are damaged, they are going to produce the scarring. So when you do these lines are important because when you know the study of the direction of these fibers, you have to take the incision in relation to that. So that if you take the incision parallel to it, it's not going to be stretched or wider in structure. An incision made across the cleavage is most likely to gape. So if you take it horizontally, it's going to gape. The upper and the lower end is going to split up the wound more. So that is going to give you a very obnoxious scar. And if it is parallel compared to the cleavage line, results in less gaping as the distance between the cuts area will not be pushed or separated out. So that is the clinical importance. So when you talk about, you know, the structure, this picture shows you there by working out the direction of the fibers. It has been seen that how these fibers are laid down and how the incision has to be given. So as to, it's not only the surgery which has to be performed, it is the skin surgery, that is the scarring or the healing of the wounds, that also has to be taken in consideration to make it a neater scar. So if you cut the skin in certain areas parallel to the cleavage lines, it's going to make a less bad scar, and if it is horizontal, they are going to be pulled up and down and they're going to produce a better bad scar. That is why this is important that these lines are known. Color of the skin, that is being produced by the certain things. One is the intrinsic pigmentation, that is the pigment cells which are there. Then the blood supply, if the skin is thin, it's going to be reflected forwards. If the supply of skin is less, the blood supply, that is going to be a pale sort of a skin which is there, and even the thickness. If the skin is thick, the blood vessels are not going to reflect onto the surface, but if the skin is thin, the vascularity is going to reflect onto the surface, giving you beautiful coloration. So all this is giving you the color of the skin. Then in certain diseases, this coloration of the skin is helpful. Cyanosis, when your blood which is passing is diseased or it is not very healthy, it is going to give you a bluish coloration, that is cyanosis. If you have this jaundice that is producing because of the accumulation of the bilirubin, there is again the yellowish coloration. So it is all on the skin, these which are going to help you. Then the melanocytes, they are going to reflect the pigmented cells which are there, certain moles which are there, nevis which are there. All these are collection of these pigmented cells. Then what happens when the age changes, what they are related before birth, all the features are being formed. But after first 2 decades to 3 decades, skin expansion of the surface area, thickening of the epidermis and the dermis takes place because the size grows. Then at puberty, because of the hormones which are related, you have the development of the hair and the nails and the glands which are going to develop. Creases, ridges, all this pattern which we have studied, they're going to stay from birth till death, they are going to stay the same. Third decade onwards, gradual changes occur when the old age starts, then gradual reflecting the processes is increased. So the changes after 30 years afterwards, the changes are start to occur. So first, before birth, all features are formed. Till the second to the third decades, the skin thickens and going to increase in size. At puberty, the changes occur. That is going to be the hair and the glands. And then at third decade onwards, that is after 30 years onward, the changes start to occur when the aging processes occur, and because of the absorption of the fat which is underneath it, certain dependency occurs. All these features are going to make the changes in the skin. What are the factors which are involved which lead to the age changes? There are two factors. One which is their intrinsic, that is something which is going to occur from inside. That is the chronological changes, what we call them. And environmental factors, for example, the excessive exposure to sun, photoaging, that is from environmental reason, and that leads to certain damages. So certain things which come from inside, that is when a machine becomes old, there are certain changes in the machine. All those changes lead to the external appearance of the skin. That leads to all the features or the age changes in the skin. So that is chronological. That is not invaded by somebody, but it is by their intrinsic or inborn changes which are there according to the age. And external factor is something, all the environmental changes which are there, exposing, there is excessive sun exposure, photo aging, that is going to damage the skin, and that is going to make the skin not that beautiful. But these external environment factors, they can be limited, that means protect your skin, whereas the intrinsic changes that occur, they cannot be changed. Intrinsic aging is third decade onwards, epidermal and dermal atrophy. Skin becomes thin. The in appearance, microstructure function of the skin becomes less. Wrinkling occurs, elasticity is less because of the connective tissue. Then there is draining, thinning, and increased purpura. That is, if you press on the skin, you get bruises very quickly because the skin becomes thin, the walls of the vessels become thin, and that is thinning is because of this, the junction of the epidermis and dermis that becomes thin, less, so that is why there is more activity, the more damage. Then cell proliferation activity, that is what we said, self-renewing and self-aging, that decreases. That means the repair or auto repair of the skin, that decreases, that occurs. Then decrease in vitamin D formation is there. Melanocytes become less in number and in formation, and keratinocytes, pigmentation so becomes less. There is loss of hair because the roots become weak, and increase in the hair in certain places. So males may eyebrows and nose hairs you see more of, or increase in length of the hair. In females, upper lip and face, they show you increased growth in the hair. That is because of these age changes. Then certain changes in the dermis, that is stiffness, flaccidity, wrinkling, loss of elasticity. All this occurs in the connective tissue aspect of the dermal layer. So that is, it becomes thin, flaccid, loose. There is no elasticity, wrinkling occurs. Loss of all thickness is due to the collagen, that is the connective tissue or the fibers which are there, they are decreased. So this leads to all these stiffness, flaccidity, wrinkling, and then microvasculature, spontaneous purpura, that is all these hemorrhages quickly are formed, even slight touch is there, slight pressure is there, that is the blood vessel walls become weak. Less sensitivity, you are damaged, you are hurt, you are not able to appreciate that this something has occurred because the sensitivity, that is the nerve reception of the person, old age person, is going to be decreased. So all these factors, these are your dermal changes with age that occur. That was the intrinsic, because of the intrinsic changes. Then you have the photoaging. Epidermal cancer can occur when there is increased exposure to the sun rays. Destruction, because your Langerhans cells, they are your immunity cells, they protect your skin because they are decreased in number with age, so that results in more chances of the malignancy of the skin. Skin injuries. Different types of injuries can occur in the skin. They are your lacerations. They can be superficial or deep. In superficial, it's just your epidermis which is going to be damaged, and deep, that is the dermis, and the deep structure is cut, the fibers are cut, and so more chances of having deep gape scar and more scarring sutures, and you have to repair it more. Burns can occur due to different reasons: chemical agents, thermal agents, ultraviolet rays, all these can cause burns. There are 3 degrees of burns. One is superficial burns, only epidermis is affected. It causes pain, edema, small swelling, peeling, and no scarring. Example, sunburns. These are small superficial burns. Then partial thickness, 2nd-degree burns, epidermis and dermis are affected. Nerves, because they are present in the dermis, so they are irritated. That is why they are very painful. Hair gland follicles are spared in regeneration. Their healing at this layer is slow. Scarring and fractures occur, but it is complete because your connective tissue fibers are there. They are still intact and they help in repairing. But it is a very painful layer because your nerves are present in this layer, so the pain is more. And 3rd-degree is when all the layers of the skin, they are damaged, maybe going to the level of the muscle, so that is, it becomes all numb because your nerves are all damaged, everything is damaged, so your pain is not there, and it is, the healing of it is very difficult, yeah, because repair is, all the tissue is damaged, so all what you have to do is grafting. That is autograft, or somewhere from the other person you put in a piece which takes up, and then they are repaired because all the tissue is damaged. You can see in all the layers. If you see the 1st-degree, it's just your superficial layer which is inflamed. 2nd-degree is just a partial one, and it's just the dermis up till dermis. But in the 3rd-degree, if you see in this picture, it is going down till the end, and so all your layers are damaged, and you need a graft, that is something from outside, and you put it there and then you repair it. How do you say that these burns are important, or it is critical how much the patient is burned? It is said that the surface area, the area which is involved, or how much is involved, it depends on the surface area. They believe in something with the rule of 9, that is, burn surface area exceeds 70%, mortality is more. And even that, even the surface area, there are certain sensitive areas which are more critical. If they are involved, though less of the area is involved, but the portion where the burn is there, that is more important. So there is a rule of 9. According to the American Burns Association classification, a major burn includes 3rd-degree burns over 10%. That means though 10% is considered as nothing, but if it is 3rd-degree burn, the surface area, it's called a major burn. If it is a 2nd-degree over 25%, that is also important. Or any 3rd-degree burns on the face, hand, feet, or perineum, all these areas, they are said to be critical. That is on the face, hand, feet, or the perineum. If you see this area, the hand, feet, perineum, all these are the sensitive areas, and if even only a small burning is there, or that any 3rd-degree in these small areas, that is, it may not be the 9%, it is just, you can see in the face, and it is 4.5%, perineum is just 1%. All these areas, hand and feet, they are just less than 9%. So it's just that whole of the limb is 4.5 and 9%, and the hands are less. So if these small areas even involved, but the damage is all to the 3rd-degree, it is going to be important. So it is depends on the area which is damaged, and that, and what type of damage it is there, that is going to make it a major burn. That finishes the skin and your general introduction. Right, I hope you have made up its small portions, but the skin has very important things which are related to it. Tomorrow, inshallah, we'll talk about the bone and muscles quickly so that you revise. We have already done this, and it's just a repetition.